My name is Ethan. I'm 25. And last week, my life flipped upside down in a way that would almost be funny if it didn't hurt so much. I grew up in a small house in the suburbs with my parents and my younger sister, Chloe. We weren't rich, but we got by. My dad worked long hours at a factory. My mom stayed home, and I worked part-time jobs all through college to help cover bills. For years, I've chipped in for groceries, utilities, even car repairs. When Dad's old truck broke down, it wasn't out of obligation. It was just what you do when you love your family. But lately, I'd started to feel like they didn't really see me as family, more like a walking wallet. Every time I got paid, it was, "Hey, Ethan, we're short on rent." Or, "Ethan, your sister needs new tires. Can you help?" I'd nod, swipe my card, and tell myself that one day things would get easier, at one day they'd be proud of me instead of treating me like the backup plan. Then, out of nowhere, my dad bought a lottery ticket. He never plays, said it was a waste of money. But that night, he came home with the biggest grin I'd ever seen on his face. "You're looking at a millionaire," he shouted, waving the ticket like it was a golden ticket to Willy Wonka's factory. Mom screamed. Chloe jumped up and down. And for a second, I felt it, too. This rush of relief, like all our problems were finally over. But that's when things started to get weird. The next morning, Dad sat me down at the kitchen table. His tone wasn't joyful anymore. It was cold. "Ethan," he said, "you don't need to keep living here. We don't need your money anymore. In fact, I don't want your dirty money touching this house. Pack your things. You've got until tonight." I just sat there, stunned. I'd been paying their bills for years, keeping this family afloat. And now, when they were finally financially secure, he wanted me gone. "Dirty money?" I asked, my voice shaking. "What are you talking about?" Dad just shrugged like it was obvious. "You think I didn't notice? You've been acting like some kind of hero, always swooping in to save us. Well, we don't need saving anymore. Get out." Mom wouldn't even look at me. Chloe smirked like she'd been waiting for this moment forever. And that's when I saw it. The lottery ticket was still sitting on the counter next to Dad's coffee mug. I picked it up, my heart pounding, and when my eyes landed on the numbers, I burst out laughing so hard that everyone just stared at me like I'd lost my mind. My laughter didn't stop for a good 30 seconds. It wasn't happy laughter, more like the kind of laugh that bubbles out when you're standing on the edge of something unthinkable. The kind that comes out when everything feels so absurd that your brain doesn't know what else to do. "What's so funny?" Chloe asked, her voice dripping with irritation. I wiped a tear from my eye and held up the ticket. "Dad, this isn't the winning ticket. Look." His smug grin faltered as I slid it across the table to him. The winning numbers were 0, 4, 0, 9, 16, 23, 32, and 41. "This thing has 0, 2, 11, 15, 24, 30, and 40. You didn't win anything." For a moment, there was silence. Mom blinked. Chloe frowned. And Dad's face slowly turned a shade of red I'd never seen before. He snatched the ticket back from me like I'd just stolen it. "You're lying," he snapped. "I checked these numbers last night, then checked them again," I said, my voice calm, but my hands shaking. "You can even pull up the lottery website." He glared at me, but grabbed his phone anyway, fumbling with the screen as Mom and Chloe crowded around him. I just stood there, my heart pounding in my ears, waiting for the moment it would click. And then it did. His face dropped. Mom gasped. Chloe muttered, "Wait, what?" "No," Dad whispered. "No, no, no. This has to be wrong." "It's not wrong," I said quietly. "You didn't win. You threw me out of the house over nothing." That should have been the moment everything snapped back to reality, a moment where Dad would look up, embarrassed, and mutter something about getting carried away, maybe even apologize. But instead, he doubled down. "Fine," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Even if I didn't win, I still don't want you here. You think you're so much better than us, Ethan. Always acting like we owe you something because you paid a few bills. Well, guess what? We didn't ask you to." I stared at him, stunned. "Didn't ask me to? Are you serious? You called me at work last month crying because you couldn't make rent." Mom crossed her arms. "We were desperate, Ethan. We thought you helped because you loved us, not because you wanted to hold it over our heads forever." "I never held it over your heads," I said, my voice rising. "I just wanted to be part of this family. But apparently, that's only true as long as I'm useful to you." Chloe scoffed. "Oh, give me a break. You act like you're some kind of saint just because you paid for groceries a couple of times. Big deal. Plenty of people live at home without helping at all." "Yeah," I shot back, "like you. You don't have a job, Chloe. You've been living here rent-free for years." Her face twisted into a smirk. That's different. I'm still in school. You're 22 and you've switched majors 3 times, I said. When exactly do you plan on graduating? Dad slammed his hand on the table, making all of us jump. Enough. I will not have you disrespecting your sister in my house. You're leaving today, Ethan, whether you like it or not. That was it. No apology, no recognition of how much I'd sacrificed. Just more accusations and a deadline. I felt something inside me crack. All those years of biting my tongue, working late shifts, giving them every spare dollar I had just so we could keep the lights on, and now I was being kicked out because they no longer needed me. I packed my things in silence. Mom didn't come to my room. Chloe walked past my door, humming like she was celebrating. Dad stayed planted in front of the TV, acting like nothing had happened. Every box I filled felt heavier than the last, not because of what was inside, but because of what it represented. My whole life being shoved into cardboard and taken away. When I finally carried the last box out to my car, Dad stood at the door. "Leave the house key," he said. I dropped it in his hand and looked him straight in the eye. "One day," I said, my voice steady, "you're going to realize what you threw away today. And when that day comes, I hope you remember this moment." He didn't say anything. He just shut the door in my face. That should have been the end of it, but it wasn't. For the next few weeks, I stayed at a friend's apartment, trying to get back on my feet. I picked up extra hours at work, saved as much as I could, and kept telling myself I'd be okay. But then the texts started coming. At first, it was just little things from Mom. "Hey, do you know when the water bill is due?" Or, "Chloe's car broke down. Any chance you could help?" I ignored them at first, thinking they'd get the hint. But they didn't. The texts became guilt trips. "You know, we took care of you all these years. The least you could do is help your sister. Your dad's blood pressure is high. He shouldn't have to stress about money right now." I stared at those messages, my hands clenched into fists. They kicked me out, told me they didn't need me, and now they were asking for money again. And then, just when I thought it couldn't get worse, Chloe sent me a picture. It was her in front of a brand new car, grinning from ear to ear. "Look what Dad got me," the caption read. I saw red. They were buying her cars while asking me for money. They were treating me like an ATM, even after they'd thrown me out. I felt something cold settle in my chest that day. Because if they wanted me out of their lives so badly, they were about to find out what that really meant. I wish I could say I cooled off after Chloe's message, that I let it go, focused on myself, and didn't let it eat me alive. But it did. It gnawed at me every single day. Every time I clocked in at work. Every time I skipped buying myself lunch to save a few bucks. Every time I walked past the display of new phones and reminded myself my cracked screen still worked. The thought that they had thrown me out, bought Chloe a brand new car, and were still bold enough to ask me for money made my stomach twist. Then came the moment that really broke something inside me. It was a Friday night, and I was sitting on my friend Liam's couch, finally relaxing after a long week. My phone buzzed, a message from Mom. Normally, I would have ignored it, but something in me hesitated. I opened it. "Ethan, we need you to send $500 tonight. The power bill is overdue, and they're threatening to shut it off. Your sister has an important online exam this weekend. Don't let her fail because of you." I stared at that message for a long time. Because of me? They threw me out, told me I wasn't part of the family anymore, and now her failing school was my fault. I didn't reply right away. I put my phone down and tried to focus on the TV, but my chest felt tight. I could almost hear my dad's voice in my head. "We didn't ask you to help all those times." That's when the second message came through. "This is serious, Ethan. If you care about your family at all, you'll help us. We already gave Chloe all the money we had for tuition and her car. There's nothing left." That one stung. It was the unspoken truth laid bare. They had spent what little they had left on Chloe, and now they wanted me to pick up the slack again. I typed out a reply and deleted it 3 times before finally sending. "You kicked me out. Find another solution." I expected that to be the end of it. Maybe a passive-aggressive guilt trip. Maybe silence. Instead, an hour later, there was a knock at the apartment door. It was Dad. Liam opened it, startled, and stepped aside as Dad barged in like he owned the place. "We need to talk," he said, his tone low and angry. I stood up, my stomach dropping. "What are you doing here?" "You ignored your mother," he said, glaring at me. "She told you we need money. You're sitting here while your family suffers." "You mean while you buy Chloe new cars?" I shot back. His jaw tightened. "She's in school. She needs support." "I needed support, too," I said, my voice rising. "But you never gave it to me. I worked my butt off to keep that house running. And you kicked me out the second you thought you didn't need me anymore." You were poisoning this family, he snapped. Always making us feel guilty for accepting your help. You think we didn't notice? I felt like I'd been slapped. Poisoning the family? Dad, I kept us from losing the house. Enough, he barked. You're giving us $500 tonight. If you don't bother coming around again. You'll regret it. There it was. The line that crossed everything. He wasn't just asking. He was threatening me. Liam stepped forward then, clearly uncomfortable. Hey, maybe you should go? This isn't the place. But Dad ignored him. He stepped closer until he was right in my face. You think you're so independent now? Let's see how long you last when you've burned every bridge you have. Something inside me snapped. Get out, I said quietly. He sneered. Excuse me. Get out. He glared at me for a long moment, then turned on his heel and stormed out, slamming the door behind him so hard the frame rattled. I stood there, my hands shaking, my chest heaving. Liam put a hand on my shoulder, but didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. Later that night, I logged into my bank account to check my balance, just to reassure myself that I was still okay financially. That's when I saw it. A $500 transfer I hadn't authorized. My heart sank. I clicked through the details and felt the blood drain from my face. It wasn't a transfer. It was a withdrawal from my savings account. Somehow, my parents had accessed my bank account and taken the money anyway. I sat there in stunned silence for a long time. I'd given them access years ago, back when I was still living at home, just in case of emergencies. I'd never thought they would use it against me, but they had. And that was the moment everything changed. Because this wasn't about helping them anymore. This was theft. This was betrayal. This was the people I had trusted most in the world, proving that they would take from me, lie to me, and throw me away without hesitation. That night, I closed my account and moved what little money I had left to a new bank. I blocked Mom and Dad's numbers, but inside I was seething, because they had just started a war. The next few weeks were some of the hardest of my life. For the first time, I felt completely unmoored, like the ground I'd been standing on my whole life had crumbled beneath. I didn't just lose my home. I lost my family. The people who were supposed to have my back had proven that when push came to shove, they'd rather shove me out the door. I didn't tell Liam what happened with my account. He already felt bad enough letting me stay with him rent-free, and I didn't want to add to his stress. Instead, I kept my head down and threw myself into work. I picked up double shifts, stayed late, and took any overtime I could get. It wasn't enough to distract me completely, though. The anger still simmered under the surface like hot coals. Some nights, after Liam went to bed, I'd sit on the couch staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in my head. Every time Dad asked me for money. Every time Mom guilt-tripped me. Every time Chloe smirked as though she had won some invisible competition. I thought about that slammed door, about Dad's words. You'll regret it. And my chest would tighten until I felt like I couldn't breathe. But the worst part was the silence. No texts, no calls, nothing from them after they took the money. It was like I had been erased from their lives, except when they needed something. The first week, I kept expecting Mom to reach out, maybe to apologize, maybe to explain. By the second week, I realized no apology was coming. By the third, I knew for sure they thought they were right. One rainy night, I decided to drive by the house. I told myself it was just to grab the last few things I'd left in the garage, an old box of tools, some childhood mementos. But really, I think I just wanted to see if they missed me. When I pulled up, the driveway was full. Chloe's new car was parked right in the middle like a trophy. The lights were on, and through the living room window, I could see all three of them sitting together, laughing. My mom leaned on my dad's shoulder. Chloe gestured wildly with her hands as she told some story. They looked happy, and it broke me. I didn't go in. I didn't knock. I just sat in my car, watching them through the rain-streaked glass until the lump in my throat became too much and I had to drive away. Back at Liam's apartment, I stayed up late again, this time with a notebook and pen. I started writing things down, numbers, dates, amounts. All the times I had bailed them out, how much money I had sent over the years, how many hours I had worked to do it. I wanted to see it all on paper. By the time I was done, the total was enough to make me feel sick. Thousands of dollars. Thousands that could have gone toward my own life, a better car, my own apartment, maybe even a vacation. Instead, it had gone to them. And for what? For them to toss me aside the second they thought they had won the lottery. The next morning, I opened my laptop and started looking for a new place to live. It didn't have to be big, just mine. Somewhere I could lock the door and not have to worry about who was going to take my money while I slept. Liam noticed the change in me. You're quieter than usual, he said one night as we ate takeout on the couch. I'm just tired, I said. He gave me a look like he didn't believe me, but didn't push. That was the thing about Liam. He didn't pry. He just made space for me to figure things out. And slowly, I started to. I found a tiny one-bedroom apartment about 20 minutes from work. It wasn't much. Creaky floors, thin walls, and an ancient stove that made a strange whistling sound. But when I signed the lease, something shifted inside me. For the first time since leaving my parents' house, I felt like I was taking back control. Moving day was bittersweet. Liam helped me carry boxes up the narrow staircase, joking about how I was finally an adult now. I laughed along, but inside, I was nervous. This was it. No more safety nets, no more fallback plan. That night, as I sat on the floor of my new apartment eating a sandwich because I hadn't unpacked my dishes yet, I realized I felt lighter. Lonely, yes, but also free. I started working on myself in ways I hadn't before. I set a strict budget, opened a savings account only I had access to, and began reading about personal finance. I got serious about work, volunteering for projects that could lead to a promotion. I even started going to the gym with Liam just to clear my head. But no matter how much I improved my own life, the anger didn't go away. If anything, it grew sharper with time. Because every time I opened social media, there was Chloe posting about some new thing she got, a designer purse, concert tickets, dinner at expensive restaurants, all funded by my parents, of course. And then one day, I got a message from a mutual friend who still lived in our old neighborhood. Hey, just so you know, your parents have been telling everyone you abandoned them after your dad lost his job. They're saying you refused to help and left them to fend for themselves. I read that message 3 times before it sank in. They weren't just ignoring me. They were rewriting the story to make me the villain. And that was the moment I decided this wasn't just about moving on anymore. If they wanted to tell the world I was selfish, that I was the bad guy, I was going to make sure they understood exactly what selfish really looked like. I didn't know how yet, but I was done letting them write the narrative. When I look back now, I think the moment I signed that lease was the start of everything. It didn't feel powerful at the time, more like a survival move. But once I had my own space, my own set of keys, something in me began to shift. At first, it was just small things. I started keeping a routine. Wake up at 6:30, cook breakfast, pack my own lunch, hit the gym with Liam after work. For years, I had been running on fumes, letting exhaustion and guilt run my life. Now, every choice felt intentional. And then opportunities started to appear. About 2 months after moving into the apartment, my manager at work pulled me aside. "Ethan," she said, "I've noticed how much you've been stepping up lately. We have a team lead position opening up next quarter. I think you'd be a great fit." For a second, I just stood there shocked. No one had ever said anything like that to me before. Not my parents, not teachers, not anyone. It lit a fire in me. I spent the next few weeks doing everything I could to prove I was worthy of that role. I stayed late, took on projects no one else wanted, and even trained a couple of new hires. By the time the promotion became official, I was ready. The raise wasn't massive, but it was enough to give me breathing room. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was just surviving. I was building something. I used part of the extra money to furnish the apartment properly, piece by piece. A small dining table, a second-hand couch, real dishes instead of paper plates. And with each little improvement, I felt myself growing. I started seeing friends more often. Not just Liam, but people I hadn't had time for back when every paycheck was going straight to my parents. We'd grab dinner, catch a movie, just hang out, and I realized how much of life I had been missing. The gym became a kind of sanctuary for me. At first, I hated it. My arms burned, my legs felt like jelly, and I wanted to quit every 5 minutes. But slowly, I got stronger. I started to see definition in my shoulders. My posture improved, and the constant knot of anxiety in my chest loosened a little more each day. One night, Liam and I were walking back from the gym when he said, "You know, you're different now." I raised an eyebrow. "Different how?" "I don't know." "Confident. Like you're not just reacting to everything anymore. You're actually living." I smiled at that because he was right. But it wasn't just about my personal growth. My professional life was changing too. The projects I had taken on as team lead were going so well that upper management started to notice. I got invited to meetings I'd never been part of before. People started asking for my input, listening when I spoke. And then came the big break. One of our senior analysts went on leave unexpectedly, and I was asked to temporarily take over one of their accounts. It was complicated work, the kind of thing that could make or break your career. But I poured myself into it. Late nights, early mornings, triple-checking everything. When the quarterly results came in, The account had not only improved but exceeded expectations. My manager called me into her office again, this time with the director sitting beside her. "Ethan," she said, smiling, "we're impressed. We'd like to make your role permanent, and there will be a salary adjustment to reflect the additional responsibilities." I left that office in a daze, my heart pounding. I called Liam on the way home, barely able to contain my excitement. By the time I got to the apartment, he already had 2 beers on the counter. "You did it," he said, grinning. "Yeah," I said, grinning back. "I really did." That night, as I sat in my living room, surrounded by the quiet hum of a place that was truly mine, I realized something important. I didn't need them anymore. Not their approval, not their validation, not their guilt trips, or their manipulation. I was doing fine without them. More than fine. I was thriving. But that's when the first crack appeared in the silence. It was a Sunday morning, and I was sipping coffee by the window when my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Ethan, it's Mom. Please call me. Your dad isn't doing well." For a moment, my heart clenched. Despite everything, they were still my parents. I stared at the message, torn. Then another one came through. "We need help with the mortgage. If we lose the house, your sister will have to drop out. Please, just this once. Just this once." I set the phone down and stared out the window for a long time. Because while part of me wanted to rush back to fix everything like I used to, another part of meth part that had spent months rebuilding my life knew better. This wasn't just about money. It was about control. And for the first time, I held all the cards. I didn't reply that day. Instead, I went for a run, pushing myself harder than I ever had before, until my lungs burned and sweat stung my eyes. By the time I got back to the apartment, I knew one thing for certain. Whatever happened next, I wasn't going to let them write the story this time. I was going to write it myself. And if they thought they could guilt me into handing over everything I'd worked so hard to build, they were about to find out just how wrong they were. I didn't respond to Mom's messages right away, but I didn't delete them, either. I kept them, letting them sit in my phone like a reminder of the old pattern they were trying to pull me back into. It was tempting, the idea of swooping in, saving the day, being the good son again. But I knew where that road led. I'd walked it before, and it had ended with me homeless, broke, and betrayed. So instead of replying, I went back to my notebook. I had kept every page of the one I started the night I sat in Liam's apartment, adding up all the money I'd given them. Now, I began a new one. This one wasn't just about recording the past. It was about planning the future. Step 1. I made sure my financial position was unshakable. I'd been saving steadily since my promotion, but now I doubled down. I cut unnecessary expenses, automated my savings, and even opened an investment account. My company offered a 401k match I had never taken advantage of. I signed up that week. I read books about money management, watched hours of free lectures online, and even spoke to a financial advisor. The more I learned, the angrier I became because, looking at the numbers, I realized that if I had never given my parents that money, I could already own a small home outright. I could have been years ahead. That anger didn't crush me this time. It sharpened me. It gave me clarity. Step 2. I started documenting everything. Every text, every call, every voicemail. I even asked a couple of old friends to write down what they remembered about all the times I had helped my parents, the nights they had called me in a panic about bills, the times they saw me handing over cash. One of them still had screenshots of messages my mom had sent thanking me for covering utilities or groceries. I asked her to send them to me. It felt strange gathering this evidence, like I was building a case. But that's exactly what I was doing because deep down, I knew this wasn't just about revenge. This was about protecting myself. If they were willing to drain my account once, what else would they do? What stories would they tell about me to justify it? Step 3. I started paying attention to their financial situation. At first, I didn't care what they were doing. I had blocked them and moved on. But after Mom's message about the mortgage, I became curious. I still had access to some public records from when I used to help pay their bills. I started looking into property tax records, mortgage filings, anything I could legally access. That's when I found out they had taken out a second mortgage on the house shortly after I left. I sat there staring at the document, shaking my head. They had borrowed against the house, probably to buy Chloe her car and cover her tuition. And now they were in trouble. And here was the twist of irony that almost made me laugh. If they defaulted, they wouldn't just lose the house. They'd lose the only thing they had that tied them to a middle-class life. It was exactly what they had accused me of threatening them with. Except this time, I wouldn't have to lift a finger. Step 4. I began building a new network of allies. I stayed in touch with Liam, of course, But I also reconnected with some extended relatives, people I hadn't seen in years because my parents had always dismissed them as meddlers. One of them, my Aunt Margaret, turned out to be an accountant. Over coffee one afternoon, I told her a carefully edited version of what had happened, leaving out the ugliest details, but making it clear I had been financially taken advantage of. She nodded sympathetically and said something I'll never forget. "You don't have to let them do this to you again. You have options." When I told her about the second mortgage, she actually winced. "They're digging a hole they can't climb out of," she said. "And if they think you're going to fill it for them, they're in for a rude awakening." She helped me look over my own finances, gave me advice on protecting my assets, and even suggested I consider legal steps if they ever tried to access my accounts again. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't alone. Step 5. I began thinking about timing. I didn't want to just cut them off. That would have been easy, too easy. I wanted them to see me succeed, to see the life I was building without them, to realize little by little that they had pushed away the one person who could have been their greatest ally. So, I started posting more on social media, not bragging, just subtle things. A picture of my apartment with the caption, "First place I can really call mine." A photo with my coworkers after a big project launch. Me and Liam at the gym, grinning after hitting a personal best. I wasn't trying to show off. I was reminding them I existed and that I was doing just fine without them. The messages started to trickle in again after that. "Mom first, then Chloe. We miss you. It's been too long. Dad wants to see you." But I wasn't the same Ethan they had kicked out. I didn't reply immediately. I let days pass before sending a simple, neutral response. "I'm busy. Maybe another time." And then one day, completely out of the blue, Chloe sent me a message that nearly made me laugh out loud. "Dad said if you come home for dinner this weekend, he'll apologize. He admits he overreacted." It should have been everything I wanted, the thing I had dreamed about on all those lonely nights in Liam's apartment. But instead of feeling relieved, I felt powerful. Because for the first time, they weren't holding the cards. I was. And I wasn't ready to let them off the hook just yet. I didn't go to dinner that weekend. In fact, I didn't go the weekend after that, either. I waited, slowly, deliberately, because this wasn't just about hearing Dad say the words, "I'm sorry." This was about shifting the balance of power completely, about making sure they understood what they had done and what it had cost them. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. One afternoon, I got a call from Aunt Margaret. "Ethan," she said carefully, "I think you should know your parents are behind on their mortgage again. I know you're not involved with them right now, but I thought you'd want to be aware." I thanked her, hung up, and just sat there for a while, staring at my apartment wall. This was it. This was the moment I had been quietly preparing for. I didn't rush into anything. Instead, I doubled down on my planning. I met with Margaret again, and she explained to me exactly what would happen if they defaulted, how long the process would take, what notices they'd get, what options they'd have. She also reminded me that I was under no obligation to step in. That night, I went through all my notes, all my documentation, all my records of what I had given them. I put everything into a single, organized folder not just for me, but for anyone who might ever try to twist the narrative again. I wanted proof of exactly what I had done for them and why I was no longer doing it. Then, when I felt completely prepared, I made my move. I texted Mom and told her I'd come to dinner. The reaction was immediate, a flood of happy emojis, exclamation points. Chloe will be so excited. Walking up to that house felt surreal. The same house I had been kicked out of months ago, standing there with my car parked in the driveway like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. Chloe opened the door, smiling, but it looked forced, nervous. Mom hugged me first, too tightly, like she was afraid I might slip away again. Dad was at the table, arms crossed, expression unreadable. We sat down to eat. At first, it was awkward. Small talk about work, the weather, Chloe's classes. Then, Dad cleared his throat. "Ethan," he said slowly, "I need to say something. I was wrong about a lot of things." I stayed quiet, letting him speak. "I shouldn't have kicked you out. I shouldn't have said what I said about your money. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I see now I wasn't. I'm sorry." There it was. The apology I had imagined so many times. But instead of rushing to accept it, I let the silence hang for a beat. "Thank you," I said finally. "I appreciate that." Mom looked relieved, like she thought that was the end of it. But I wasn't done. I pulled out the folder I had brought with me and set it on the table. "This," I said, "is everything I've given this family over the years. Every rent payment, every grocery run, every emergency fund transfer. I want you to look at it." Mom hesitated, but I opened it for her. Page after page of numbers, receipts, screenshots, printed messages. Chloe's smile faltered. Dad's jaw tightened. "This is not to rub it in," I said calmly. "It's to make something very clear. I've done my part, more than my part. I kept this family afloat when no one else could, and you took advantage of that until I had nothing left." Dad didn't say anything, but his face was pale. "So, here's where we stand," I continued. "I'm not your enemy. I don't want to see you fail, but I will not bail you out ever again. If you lose this house, that's on you. If Chloe drops out of school, that's on you. I will not be your backup plan anymore." The room was so quiet. I could hear the clock ticking on the wall. Mom finally spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "We're behind on the mortgage. We were hoping." I held up a hand. "I know, and I'm not helping. You made your choice when you kicked me out. You wanted independence from me. You have it." Chloe opened her mouth like she wanted to argue, then closed it again. "I hope you figure it out," I said, standing. "I really do. But this is the last time I come here unless something changes." I left the folder on the table and walked out. For the first time in months, I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel guilty. I felt free. And I knew, deep down, that whatever happened next, whether they saved the house or lost Ivy, would have to face the truth about what they had done. Because I had handed them the mirror, and whether they liked the reflection or not, they couldn't unsee it. Leaving that house was like stepping out of a storm and into clear air for the first time. For weeks, I didn't hear from them. No calls, no texts. I didn't know if they were angry, hurt, or just processing what I'd laid out for them. Part of me thought they might rally and figure things out, but part of me knew they wouldn't. Then, 2 months later, I got the call. It was from Aunt Margaret. "Ethan," she said gently, "your parents' house is going into foreclosure. They missed their last 3 payments. The bank is starting proceedings." I sat there in silence for a long moment. I wasn't surprised, just heavy. "Thank you for letting me know," I said quietly. A week later, Mom texted me for the first time since the dinner. "Ethan, please. We're going to lose the house. We'll have nowhere to go. Chloe is devastated. Can you help us just this once?" I stared at the screen, feeling the weight of the words. Then I typed back, "I already did, for years. This is what you chose when you kicked me out." Her reply came within seconds. "You can't really mean that. This is your family." I took a deep breath before replying. "I do mean it. And I am your family. That's why I gave you everything I had for years. But you threw me out. You drained my savings. And you tried to make me feel guilty for walking away. This is not on me anymore." There was no response after that. The next few weeks were a whirlwind for them. I didn't watch from the sidelines with glee. I watched with a strange mix of sadness and closure. The for sale sign went up in the yard, then came down a month later when the bank took possession. They moved into a small rental across town. Chloe posted online about having to drop out of school because of bad luck. I didn't correct her. Instead, I kept focusing on myself. I was promoted again at work, this time into a salaried position. My savings crossed a milestone I never thought I'd see. I traded in my old car for something reliable and new. My apartment, once bare, now felt like a real home, a place I wanted to come back to every night. Then one Sunday morning, there was a knock at my door. It was Dad. He looked older, somehow tired. He stood there for a long moment before speaking. "Can I come in?" I hesitated, then stepped aside. He sat at my small dining table, looking around the apartment like he was trying to understand how I'd built a life here without him. "Finally," he said, "we lost the house." I nodded. "I know." He swallowed hard. "I wanted to say you were right. About everything. I thought I was doing what was best for this family, but I was just angry and proud, and I hurt you because of it." For a moment, I saw the man I had looked up to as a kid. Not the one who had slammed the door in my face, but the one who taught me how to ride a bike, who took me to my first baseball game. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said quietly, "but I wanted you to know I'm sorry." I let the silence sit for a moment. Then I said, "I forgive you, but things can't go back to how they were." He nodded. "I know." We sat there a little longer, not as father and son, but as 2 men who had both been through something and come out the other side. When he left, I stood at the window watching him go. For the first time, I didn't feel that tightness in my chest. That night, I pulled out the last page of my notebook, the one I had left blank on purpose, and wrote down one final line. They tried to break me, but they built me instead. Then, I closed the notebook, set it on the shelf, and turned off the light. And for the first time in a long time, I slept peacefully.